Hi, I'm Richard, Trails of the City, Footprints of London and Other Places, History Tour Guide, and welcome to the third instalment of Trails Live History Casts. For those of you that haven't tuned in so far, what I'm doing during this very difficult period of the coronavirus pandemic lockdown is to do a few commentaries online from the coziness of my own front living room and presenting on my Facebook page Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, a little features on London historic characters who I have presented on various walks I've done over the years. And this week's character, everyone, is Chance, the fireman's dog. What? A dog? I hear you cry. Well, this is no mere mutt, but a very historic hound, famed for his 3 short years, perhaps in the limelight, or should I say firelight, during the 1830 of his intrepid escapades with great dramatic fires in London. The first officially documented dog of a London fire brigade, commemorated in artwork and written up in obituaries. And I came across Chance when researching my walk, the Great Fire of Westminster, which I devised and executed jointly with my Trails colleague Steve. It was all about the tumultuous events of the night when the medieval Houses of Parliament burnt to the ground. It was partly inspired and based on Caroline Shenton's masterly work on that subject. It was an event that was watched by the streets around, over the bridges and the bank opposite, by over 10,000 people and at least one dog, described as equally thrilling as it was horrific, horribly beautiful. And Chance, the newspapers described as a cross breed between a blank-tanned terrier and a pointer, quite a large dog. Dalmatians were the first breed of dogs associated with London fire services. This is going back into the 1700s, when we're talking about fire carts led by horsepower, which we, in 1834, were just coming towards the end of. And the Dalmatians would jog along either side of the horses, barking to help clear the way, and then stand with the horse at the blaze in what would otherwise be very disturbing for the horse, and then dive into the burning building to help the rescue operation. But back to Chance. For the first 11 years or so of his life, he was owned by a weaver from Spitalfields. And then in 1832, he first caught sight of the London Fire Engine establishment en route to a fire in the East End of London, and he was bitten by the bug. I should make it clear at this point that there was no main public fire service, just a series of brigades that were managed by separate fire insurance companies. Indeed, this was one of the big problems that was flagged up about the fire fighting efforts in 1834 at the parliamentary fire, i.e. that there was no centralized command of the whole effort. But back to Chance. He started to follow the London Fire Engine establishment then. They were one of many, as I say, fire services in London, but actually the biggest, and only recently formed. And Chance wouldn't follow after any other. He was very attracted by the silvery grey aspect of their uniforms. And as much as his owner, Weaver, kept trying to retrieve him, Chance was incorrigible and kept following the fires, and so he was given up to the London Fire Engine establishment, to which they were very glad to accept him as their official dog. And he would stay with individual firefighters in their homes for a couple of nights at a time, developing no particular allegiance to any of them, but being loved by all of them. So much so that they banded together and had a brass collar provided to go round his neck, with a little rhyme inscribed upon it, which went as follows: "Stop me not, but onward let me jog, for I am Chance, the London fireman's dog." And there were a number of escapades which Chance got into, chronicled by the newspapers. On one occasion, at a blaze in Bow Lane, with the upper floors totally burnt out, Chance was left jumping from one burning joist to another before he fell through into the cellar. On another occasion, he inexplicably yapped at a flame, seriously burning his mouth. A further time, he had his legs run over by a fire cart. You do wonder to what extent some of these stories might have been apocryphal, but they're all there in black and white, written up in the venerable national newspapers. Well, what about Chance's presence at the most spectacular fire of his day in 1834? Well, there are at least two very authoritative testimonies to his presence there. One in some artwork by William Heath, the colourful lithograph that I've included on my timeline. If you look very closely in the middle of the lithograph, about 2/3 of the way down, you will see a small outline of a dog, which is Chance. The other reference is none other than Charles Dickens, and he was a young parliamentary reporter at the time, just on the cusp of his great literary career. And he was particularly curious about some of the authority figures present at the fire, who each were trying to perhaps impose their authority on brigading the firefighting effort to varying effects. In particular, he talks about one William Hughes, MP for Oxford, and compares him to Chance. He and the celebrated fireman's dog were observed to be remarkably active at the conflagration. They both ran up and down and in and out, getting under everyone's feet and into everybody's way, fully impressed that they were doing a great deal of good, and barking tremendously. Well, as you can imagine, the dangerous situations that Chance kept getting himself into, this took a toll on his body. And for the last half a year or so of his life and work for the London Fire Engine establishment, he went blind. And in fact, he died just a few weeks before the first anniversary of the fire. It is said that on his deathbed, he tried to spring up and chase after one last fire. But his story doesn't end with his death, because the firemen clubbed together and got a professional taxidermist to stuff Chance's body, to have him presented nicely in a glass case, to stand in pride of place in their headquarters in Watling Street. But the devious taxidermist thought that he could make a bigger buck by actually selling the stuffed Chance to a showman to be presented at fairgrounds for a penny a pop. But the firemen rumbled to this. One of them went along anonymously, spied Chance, returned with all of his men from the station, and strong-armed Chance back, despite the showman's effort to allow them only to do so after relieving themselves of several sovereigns. And Chance was able to be mounted in pride of place in their headquarters station, with the inscription placed in front of it reading, "Chance, the fireman's dog, died October the 10th, 1835. This is humbly inscribed by the Committee of the London Fire Establishment and their obedient servants." But in more recent times, the stuffed body of Chance has disappeared. We don't know what happened to the body at all. But by way of a bit of a postscriptum, what about the so urgently needed reform to public fire services in London that was clearly flagged up by the events of the parliamentary fire in 1834. In fact, things were so urgent that it wasn't for another 30 years that one public centralised body was formed in 1866, when the Metropolitan Fire Brigade was put together and the system was basically nationalised. As a postscriptum, it's also interesting and rather curious to note that dogs still today play a very integral part fighting fires around London and other capitals. Their sense of smell is meant to be far better than anything that human technology can come up with, in particular for finding the source of a fire and for helping investigations as to whether it has been deliberately started or not. Very important when forming any case for arson. Well, thanks very much again, everyone, for listening. And I know a bit of a lighter weight subject and take on a historical incident, but I thought, why not? So I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for listening. Continue staying safe, keeping calm, keeping it all together, everyone, as I'm trying to do. So everyone, I'll just say, stay in your kennels, protect the NHS, and save canine and human lives. Bye-bye. Bye.